All right, History of Bisphosphonates 102. Recall that in 1969 it was shown by Herbert Fleisch's group that pyrophosphate, the inorganic and naturally occurring compound, was able to inhibit the dissolution of hydroxyapatite crystals, which are naturally occurring minerals in bones and teeth. And why did this matter? Because hydroxyapatite makes up about 60% of bone by weight. And it didn't take long for Fleisch to show that the main subject of our presentation, bisphosphonates, were also able to inhibit hydroxyapatite dissolution, and he did this in the form of two landmark papers published in Science in 1969. The two compounds that were studied in those papers were tidronate and clonidate, and these were done as a collaboration between Fleisch's laboratory in Lausanne and Dave Francis of the Procter and Gamble Company. And interestingly, Dave Francis was a biochemist and researcher in the dental section of Procter and Gamble and was interested in bisphosphonates application as a potential toothpaste additive. Of note, Procter and Gamble are no longer involved in the research or manufacture of prescription drugs, but they still do make toothpaste like Crest. And recall that the original mechanism of these compounds, bisphosphonates, were to prevent calcification, and that's what their first clinical use was in humans as well. And the first documented clinical use of a bisphosphonate was published in 1969 as a collaboration between Fleisch and an orthopedist by the name of Dr. C. Andrew Bassett at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. And this was huge as it was the first clinical application of a bisphosphonate in a human to treat disease. Specifically, they treated myositis ossificans progressiva in a 16-month-old, and this is a very rare disease where normal tendons, muscles, and ligaments gradually turn to bone. Well, once Fleisch and Bassett studied it in humans, everyone else started doing it in the 1970s as well, except all of these other studies focused on the treatment of Paget's disease of bone, not myositis or osteoporosis. It didn't take long after these studies for Didronel to get its first FDA approval in the US, and this occurred in 1977. The drug was approved for the labeled indication of treatment of Paget's disease. Of note, the commercially available pharmaceutical product was developed by Procter& Gamble, the toothpaste people, and you can see evidence of this if you zoom into the advertisement. Didronel never did get its official FDA approval for the treatment of osteoporosis in the United States, but it certainly was used for that purpose off-label. This advertisement is actually from the UK, where a separate product called Didronel PMO was approved by the NHS for the treatment of postmenopausal osteoporosis, and that's actually what the PMO stands for, is postmenopausal osteoporosis. And next time we will talk about what happened to Didronel, why it's no longer used, I promise, and that'll be the end of this bisphosphonate series. And we'll also do an overview on the timeline, starting in 1995 with the FDA approval of alendronate or Fosamax, which even 30 years later in 2025 is still the most commonly prescribed bisphosphonate for the treatment of osteoporosis. So a lot of ground to cover.